Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz and today we're going to have a look into some advanced politicking scenarios that are fairly controversial, even in tournament grinder circles, but also pretty efficient in securing a draw from a losing spot so that you get 1 point instead of 0 points and potentially land a better tournament result. So let's go. In a previous video I've talked about kingmaking and how it is the most elegant out for everyone in a kingmaking scenario to accept a draw so that everyone gets 1 point and nobody's forced to decide who gets to win and who doesn't. Although true kingmaking is pretty rare in MTG, because it requires all relevant information to be open to all players, we sometimes get really close to a true kingmaking scenario. So let's have a quick look at an exemplary situation. In this situation, player 1 is presenting a win with Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. Player 2 can also present a win with combat damage on their turn. Player 3 is faced with a decision to either trickbind Thassa's Oracle trigger or let it resolve. If they counter it, player 1 will not be able to win and player 2 will kill the whole table on their turn. But if they don't counter it, player 1 will win the game. Either way, player 3 can't win, but their actions determine who else gets to win. Thereby, they are the kingmaker, which is a position they don't want to be in, because it also means that they can't win the game. So what game theory suggests and what high-level tournament players do in this situation is to propose a draw. It is in the best interest for all players to accept the draw, because whoever doesn't accept the draw will trade a potential 1 point for a guaranteed 0 points, while also giving the other player 5 points, which additionally worsens their tournament standing when compared to specific players. So if you ever come into a situation like this, it is important to A. recognize it as fast as possible so that you can avoid misplays and or take the lead in guiding the pot through this situation. And B. it is important to either suggest the draw early or accept it before your opponents do. This will put your other opponents into Zugzwang, meaning they will have to agree to the draw as well, because if they don't agree to the draw, they will force the kingmaker to pull through with their interaction, which will give the other player the win. This also means that when faced with a kingmaking scenario, don't look at it like you're trading 5 points for 0 points, but rather you're trading 0 points for 1 point. As the kingmaker, it is important to never back down from your potential game action. So if you present a counterspell that would kingmake a player, but the player currently presenting the win doesn't agree to the draw, it is of utmost importance to not back down. A. you will show that your proposal was serious. B. you will establish that greediness will not be rewarded in a situation like this. And C. you can potentially still secure the draw by convincing your other opponents to not go for the win, but play for the draw. This potential agreement with the other players leads us to an even more controversial politicking scenario, the so-called Spite Pact. Let's assume player 1 presents a win with Thassa's Oracle, but the only interaction left in the pot is a Pact of Negation player 2 cannot pay for in their upkeep. A lot of people would call this a Spite Pact, because player 2 is stopping player 1 from winning at the cost of dying in their upkeep. In tournaments, however, this is a play you might actually encounter semi-regularly. Let me explain why. If player 2 does not counter the game-ending spell with their Pact of Negation, the chance of winning the game or having the draw becomes 0%, so they get 0 points for their overall tournament result. If, however, they cast the Pact of Negation, their chance of winning the game might still be at 0%, but their chance of securing a draw is higher than 0%. So, in theory, this is the more optimal play, because they might still get 1 point for their overall tournament result. You might now argue that the chance of getting to the draw is very slim, especially if the game hasn't progressed too far yet and everyone else could still go for another win attempt. But this situation can actually be leveraged by player 2 to propose a draw. They could present a Pact of Negation, ask the pot to agree to a draw. If the pot agrees, that's great, 1 point secured. Now, depending on the board state and how far the game has progressed at this point, only the player that's presenting a win could theoretically be against this proposal, because they could just rebuild and go for another win attempt later on. So how can the other players resolve this situation in the most elegant way if player 1 rejects the draw? The answer is complicity. If player 1 does not agree to the draw, player 2 should attempt to cut a deal with player 3 and 4. Player 2 could cast the Pact of Negation under the condition that player 3 and 4 do everything they can to force the game into a draw. This is actually legal, and I've heard of groups that have established this kind of politics, and while it might sound weird to do that, player 2, 3 and 4 have now turned the table on player 1 and secured 1 point for the tournament result rather than 0 points. Here two fundamental concepts of cEDH collide. On one side we have the game theory and the most optimal place to get as many points as possible in a tournament. On the other side, we have the social aspect of cEDH, which makes it necessary for players to act in a socially acceptable way so that there are no negative effects on future games they play. So when you encounter these scenarios, it is always important to feel out the dynamic of the pot and see how far you can take your politics. And this leads me to a final politicking scenario that is even more controversial than the so-called Spite Pact. I call this actively kingmaking, but maybe you have another name for it. So in the first two scenarios I showed you guys, the kingmaker was more or less forced to interact with a win attempt by potentially denying that win attempt. However, there is an even more controversial form of politicking to secure a draw in a situation that would otherwise be hopeless for the kingmaker. Let's assume player 1 is presenting a win with Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. Player 2 also has a win ready, and so does player 3. While obviously player 2 and 3 would do everything they can to stop player 1's win attempt in order to win themselves, it does not change the tournament outcome for player 4 who they lose to. So they actually don't need to interact, at least not blindly. Let's assume there are multiple counterspells on the stack trying to deny player 1's win attempt. There is no interaction left to cast for player 2 and 3, and if the stack resolves as it is, player 1 will be stopped and player 2 or 3 will win the game. So how could player 4 use their interaction to turn what would otherwise be a loss into a draw? Well, counterspells can obviously be used to counter your opponent's win attempts, but they can also be used to protect your opponent's win attempts. Saying that, I can already feel the heat coming towards me, but remember, I'm just explaining it to you because you might someday encounter it, since in a tournament every point matters, and if player 4 needs to get that point, it is in their best interest to try to secure a draw by threatening to protect player 1's win attempt with the counter magic they have in hand. By presenting their interaction and proposing the draw, they will bring about a situation where everyone's better off by accepting the draw. If player 1 doesn't accept the draw, their win attempt will be countered and they lose to player 2 or 3. If player 2 or 3 don't accept the draw, player 1's win attempt will be protected and they will lose to player 1. By accepting the draw, all players will leave the game with 1 more point for the tournament result. These situations might not be the coolest way to end a game and might cause some bad feelings for the involved players, but viewed purely from a game theoretical point of view, they will allow everyone to gain points they would otherwise not have, because remember, they are not trading 5 points for 1 point, but actually trading 0 points for 1 point. While technically this situation of actively kingmaking doesn't differ too much from the previous kingmaking scenarios of forced draws I mentioned, it definitely feels very different because player 4 is not threatening to counter an opponent's win attempt, but they are threatening to protect an opponent's win attempt. The result may be the same, but the perception is very different because this kind of politicking in a sense clashes with competitive integrity. So if faced with a situation like this, make sure to check the dynamic first and if need be explain the situation before taking hasty game actions. Politics and cEDH are both nuanced social interactions and theoretically optimal plays. Finding the balance is key to be successful over a long period of time and not get the stigma of being a toxic player. Remember, there are always more games to play and more tournaments to win, but a damaged reputation is hard to fix, especially when there actually isn't a lot on the line. And that's it. A quick little guide on different politicking scenarios and how to leverage your position and spells to get the overall best result in a tournament. Please let me know what you think about these 3 situations and how you would handle them in a tournament, especially the last one. If you enjoy my content and want to support me, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, hop over to my Discord server and please consider becoming a patron. I have different tiers set up and I also provide one-on-one coaching for those of you that want to bring their piloting to the next level. This is Eisenherz and auf Wiedersehen.